lesson tonight is about trusting and having faith. Did you get that in? Or did I just hear things? Never mind.
I didn't.
Okay.
For no reason.
All right. Okay. Anyways. So yeah, trusting and having faith. And this is kind of to conclude. Our month of talking about God's faithfulness. So we've talked about how God is faithful to answer our prayers. How, I forget what the other weeks were. How God is faithful even when we're not. Oh, and then we just talked about how God is faithful in the areas of providing for us, protecting us, and healing us. So we've talked about God's end of the deal. Tonight we're going to kind of talk about our end of the deal. God is faithful, but we have to trust in Him and we have to have faith in Him. Sometimes that's hard, mainly because there's a lot of things to worry about in this world. Obviously sin causes a lot of problems in the world. And because of the sin nature in people, there's always going to be trials and problems. When I was thinking about this, I recalled a time, I think it was the summer before I came here, I found out that a friend of mine in high school had cancer. I think it was like in her knee or something. I'm not sure exactly. I think that's where it was. But she had some form of cancer. And my mom was the one that told me about it. And something that she said, my mom was really kind of moved by this girl. I mean, she was like 16 that had been diagnosed with cancer. And like she couldn't do marching band. And she wasn't going to be able to be in school, I think, for at least part of the year. One of the things my mom had said to me when she was telling me about this was, life isn't fair, and life is really, really hard sometimes. And that's always kind of been something that's really stuck with me, something that I've thought about since then, that life is really hard sometimes. Life here on earth is not an easy thing to live. And I think we all have something different that kind of haunts us or causes us to worry, something that we're constantly worrying about or that we are stressing over. And you know what that is for yourself. That's going to be something different for all of us. Some it might be finances, some it might be grades, some it might be friendship problems, some it might be family issues, or whatever else that's going to be unique to you in exactly how you worry over it. So there are a lot of things that we can worry about, but the thing is with God is God tells us that we don't need to worry about them. We're blessed with a God that has already defeated the trials that we're going through. I think it's in Isaiah 53, the one that talks about Jesus, saying that He was pierced for our transgressions and so on. That chapter is a really awesome chapter because it kind of goes through all of these ways that Jesus suffered. And really, Jesus, when He was here on earth, went through every single thing that we face. There's not a single thing that God doesn't understand. There's not a single problem that we have that God doesn't get. Because Jesus came to earth and He suffered. It wasn't easy for Him to live here either. So our worries and our stresses are things that He's undergone too. But one of my favorite verses is John 16:33. It's actually my life verse, which it says, "For I've told you these things so that in me you might have peace. In this world you will have troubles, but take heart. I have overcome the world." I like that verse because it doesn't say, love God and your life will be butterflies and rainbows and clouds. God is, upfront and real with us. Yeah, life is hard. There's going to be trials. There's going to be troubles on this earth. But take heart, be encouraged, because I've already overcome those. I've already overcome the world. And that's part of what Jesus did when he was dying on the cross, is he was defeating death, he was defeating sin, he was defeating all of those trials and everything that makes this world, everything that sets the world apart from heaven. Jesus has already defeated those, and through him, we can defeat them too. So instead of troubles and worrying about all those things, Jesus offers perfect peace in the midst of the storms of life. One of the verses that was in the devotionals was, this one just listed Psalms 46, 1-2. And it says, God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. And then later in verse 10, it says, that's the really popular verse, be still and know that I am God. So one of the questions that I asked for that, this was day 3, I'd asked, what do you think God is trying to tell you through this passage? And when I answered that, I put the passage into words as if God was saying it to me. And so I rewrote it as this. And this is his name. When I read it, think of it as God saying it to you. I am your safe place and source of power. I am always ready to help during the hard times in life. So don't fear when the world seems to be crashing down around you. Be still, take a break, be quiet, and know that I am God. I am in control. Fear not. So I'm going to, talk about verse 10 of that chapter, where it says, be still and know that I'm God. Can you guys think of another place in the Bible where Jesus says, be still? When he was calming the storm. And I love that's the comparison there. Because to me, Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I'm God, I always connected those. Because to me it was always a comfort of when things seemed like they were totally out of control, that God is still God, and I don't have to be in control. And even if I'm out of control of the situation, God is still in control, and he still knows what he's doing. So I love that the other place where Jesus says, be still, is when he and the disciples are caught up in this terrible storm, and the disciples are freaking out, like fearing for their lives, thinking that this is the end. And Jesus is asleep, and they go and wake him up, and Jesus stands up and shouts, be still. And the storm and the waves go calm, and everything is at peace. And just as Jesus calms that storm, when he was doing that, really he was showing his authority over creation and his authority as a son of God. And that's the disciples, after he did that, the disciples were kind of freaked out, and I think it says in the Bible something like they were wondering who this guy was. But just as Jesus had the authority to calm that storm in the water and at sea, Jesus has that same authority and the same power to calm the storms in our life. God has proven himself faithful time and time again, and that's what we've been talking about the rest of this month, is that God is faithful. God has always been faithful. In the Old Testament, when a prophet was reminding the Israelites of God's faithfulness, he would always recall Egypt. If a prophet was trying to remind the Israelites to stop being whiny brats and to get into shape, he would always bring up, remember the God that brought you out of Egypt. And I think that can be a sign of God's faithfulness for us too, is that God, even since the time of creation, has been faithful with his people. So if not, just from looking back at the Old Testament of knowing that God is faithful, we can look back at situations in our own lives. I'm sure that we all have testimonies of times that God has been faithful to us. And even those can be proof of, or not proof, but assurance that God is going to be faithful still. So rather than worrying, we should trust God, because only He gives perfect peace over the storms of life. And I like what Isaiah 26:3 says. You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you. Trust in the Lord always, for the Lord God is your eternal rock. And when I think of perfect peace, especially in comparison to the storms of life, I just think of Jesus taking hold over the situations in our lives, whatever it is that you worry about, whatever it is that you are stressed out about. And He stands up and He calms that storm. And then the waters are still, and they're calm, and it's peaceful. And God can do that in your life, and He wants to. It may not always happen instantly. Sometimes I think God wants us to learn a little bit from the storms of life. But He's always faithful to provide for us through those. He's always faithful to protect us through those. And He's always going to be there through those. And He's always going to help us through those, as it said back in Psalms 46, that God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So a lot of us, as the semester comes to a close, Davis can be a very safe spot, a very safe place for us. We kind of have a nice little bubble here for the most part. And we're not without sin or issues here. But I know, especially even for me, that this is my safe place. And I don't know if it's the same situation for some of you, but going home for some students can be a really hard thing. So I want to encourage you all that Jesus can calm the storm, whether it's here or at home, but especially in light of people going home soon. Just that if you're going home into a storm, just trust God and have faith, and He can calm that storm in your life too. And just pray about that as you're going home. I'm going home knowing that I'm going into ministry of ministering to my parents, and to my brother and family, and even to people that I work with. Going home can be a mission field too. And God is faithful, and He always has been. So trust Him, and He'll carry you through. And if you're seeking peace about that, I would just really encourage you to pray through that and to tell God that you're worried about it. But trust that He's going to calm that storm. So yeah, do you guys have any thoughts on that?